Starkie, welcome to A Breath of Fresh Air. Great to have your company.
Great to be here. Great to be
You don't mean that. I've had to twist your arm somewhat to come onto this show, but I mean it. It was really great to have you here. And for a lot of our listeners, Bob, who don't know you, well, they may not know you by name, they'll certainly know the band that you've played with for many years, one of Australia's premier bands in the Skyhooks. So it's because of the success that the Skyhooks had, and you are still doing it with the Skyhooks today, that I've brought you on here and wanted to chat with you to kind of relive those 70s days of Skyhooks fame and fortune. It's cool with you?
Yeah, I'm playing. I'm glad I'm still playing. But look, I've got a Skyhook show, but I'm the only Skyhook in it. And actually, the last gig I did. Freddie joined us because my drummer couldn't make it. He got stuck in the airlines, and he turned up. So that was magnificent. It's the first time we've done like two sets of Skyhooks in about 30 years, and he
Is
was
that right?
amazing. Yeah. So look, it's a lot of fun to do. It's a great set of tunes. You know, Greg McCain's just such a brilliant songwriter. So I'm glad I'm keeping it alive, and it's very good for my guitar playing because like most instruments, if you don't use it, you lose it, and
Yeah.
it's a real stretch. Like as a guitarist to play two sets of Skyhooks tunes. I don't know what we were on back then, but some of those riffs are something else. So yeah, we're just keeping the Skyhooks tunes alive.
So do you practice all the time? Or are the gigs the practice that you need?
Well, I pick up a guitar every day, but generally speaking, we know that's it. But yeah, I do have to warm up. If we don't play that often, we might play once or twice a month, maybe.
Right.
Whereas back in the day, we were playing like 5 times a week. So yeah, it's look, it's really good. It's good for the brain. It's good for the fingers. It's good for the
Absolutely.
soul.
Absolutely. Well, if you don't mind, I want to take you back to where it all started for you and for Skyhooks generally. The band would have been described as giving the Australian music industry, and I'll do that bit again. The band has been described as giving the Australian music industry the enema that it needed. You smashed onto the scene with these incredibly colourful costumes and striking makeup long before Kiss was wearing makeup. And you just took this country and then beyond that, kind of the world by storm, really, didn't you, in the early 70s?
Well, it was certainly happening here, that's for sure. But we didn't really crack it overseas. But yeah, no, it was amazing. Look, when that first record was released, we weren't expecting anything like what happened. It just started selling and it ignited it. And I guess it was mainly due to, Greg's amazing songwriting and what he was writing about, which was like Australia and Australian things and suburbs and what have you, Australian characters. But yeah, and look at and to have two front guys like Red and a guy called Shirley up the front. I mean, that really, without them, we wouldn't have had that success. There's just no way. But Shirley, he had the sound and he had the, that, amazing personality. And yeah, we
Because
just,
you're talking about Shirley Strawn, who had been a carpenter before he joined the band, hadn't he? Tell us about how that band was formed in the first place. How did you come to join them?
a little bit of a story. My brother was in the band prior to me, and this is back in 1973. I think they started, the Skyhooks started, I think it was April 1973. And I should turn this phone off, shouldn't I?
Can you just say that bit? Yeah, just say that bit again for me so that I don't get the ping. Just go back to that they started the Skyhawks in 73.
Yeah, well, the actual Skyhooks, the first band, the first lineup started in April 73. And my brother was in it, that's Peter Starkie, and there was another guitarist called Peter Inglis. And yeah, and there was Steve Hill singing, and of course Freddie and Greg, Freddie on the drums and Greg on the bass. Greg was originally playing in a band called Reuben Tice out in past the outer suburbs, a place called Eltham and Research. And they were like the Grateful Dead, out there, that sort of rocking band, big dope smoking scene, And then he decided to leave and form a band in competition, right? And that became the Skyhooks. And so when he formed the band, he just really wanted to take it, so there was a real point of difference. And he wanted the band members to dress up. From day one, that was
Why?
part of it. So they started doing the makeup thing. My brother left the band. He was okay with the makeup, so he sort of started, wearing a glittery shirt or whatever, and a bit of teardrop makeup, whatever. But Peter Inglis, he was just a bona fide hippie. He just liked to get up on stage. He had hair down to his ass, and he'd wear shorts and thongs on stage. And he just didn't kind of fit it, and he wouldn't frock up. So those two original guitarists, they were out of the band. And when I first saw the band, my brother asked for a lift to take him to this gig. And on the way out, he said, yeah, it's a band called Skyhooks. And he was actually going to leave because he was going to join Joe Camilleri in a band backing a stripper up the west coast of Australia. So that was his plan. And so I saw the band on that night. It was out in the outer suburbs of Melbourne. I think it was Donvale in a school hall or something. And they were great. They had some really fantastic songs. I was knocked out. And so as we were driving back, I said, look, well, if you're going to go, do you think I could audition, He said, yeah, well, why not? Give it a try. And so that's what I did. I auditioned, and my guitar playing, well, I wasn't that confident in it, but I think I was probably half okay. But more to the point, I had a van, which is a very important thing to have. And also, and so I got the gig. And then I played, I think, one gig with Peter Inglis, and then there was another chap in there, Gary, I think it was Gary Dyson. And I think we played a couple of gigs, we played a couple of parties. And then Red came to a party we were playing in Carlton, and he checked out the band, and he was asked to join. He lived in the same house as Steve Hill. And so as soon as Red joined, I just knew we were onto something really, really good, because he's so charismatic and just a great creative, guitarist. And so it was just like, to me, it was just like it was set in heaven in joining. And of course, from that point, the band built. And so by the time we hit, I guess it was like January or February '74, we played the '74 Sunbury Festival, and basically we got booed off the stage. But it was just really exciting, the fact that we'd made it to play on the Sunbury stage. So that was big time for us. And of course, we're up against all those like Billy Thorpe and Carson and bands like that. They're all boogie bands.
Yeah, of course. Bob, why had Greg wanted the band to dress up and to not only frock up but to wear makeup as well? What was happening in those days in the early '70s here in Australia that demanded that in order to be successful?
Well, look, he wanted it. He wanted a show. He wanted the band to divorce themselves from the street, and so it sort of took on a life of its own. And especially when Red joined, it was, he's really into kabuki makeup, and it was inspiring, to be quite honest. And so we gradually sort of, we created our own sort of personas, and so that's the way it kind of grew. But I think originally Greg, he'd been to see, who was it? Gary Glitter at Festival Hall, and he was really impressed with that, their presentation. And so You know, that's
He liked the whole idea of the glam rock stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And
So that
so,
was a bit early though, wasn't it? Because glam rock came a little bit later. You were really at the forefront of being a glam rock band.
well, in Australia, but I mean, there was Bowie and, you know, stuff happening in England. And so, yeah,
Yeah, right.
we sort of drank from that cup. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And
I
and
myself a little bit on
you were
T-Rex.
also, sorry,
I said, I
a little bit
modelled,
of T-Rex.
yeah, I sort of modelled myself a little bit on T-Rex, you know, because I had the long hair and
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, you did indeed. Still not too short, really, these days. In those days, in the early 70s in Australia, it wasn't common to either sing in Aussie accents nor to sing about Australian places. So you were pretty groundbreaking in terms of that. Greg was writing about Melbourne, which was your home base, about suburbs in Melbourne, about iconic places and people and thoughts that were all very localised, weren't they?
Well, yeah, but also he wrote with a very, very cynical eye, you know, and that's really what separated him. He was, you know, it was fantastic. You know, when you look at, well, I call it the trilogies: Baldwin Calling, Toorak Cowboy, and Carlton. It's the Lygon Street Limbo. All fantastic tunes. And if you lived in Melbourne, you got the joke, really. You know, it was really, really. He's just such a clever writer. And look, without the brilliance of, you know, Greg McCarthy's songwriting, Skyhooks got nowhere. But also the other thing was it was a little bit naughty. You know, we had 6 tracks banned. Most of them, the bands were kind of ridiculous. You know, if you had the word dope in the song, they'd ban it. You know, it was really quite stupid. But it was good for us because you couldn't hear the tracks on the radio, so you had to buy the record. And
Or
so,
come to the gigs.
yeah, it worked out well. Yeah, people loved it. Look,
So one of,
sorry, you know,
oh,
we had the audience even before we played a note because we'd walk on stage and people would just, you know, they go, oh, yeah, check that out. You know, it's like it was, as you say, it was colourful, and it was kind of ridiculous, but it was just something to really see. It was not just watching a, you know, bunch of blokes, you know, in denim up there sort of playing boogie. It was sort of really kind of electric and exciting, you know.
so you appealed to both the young girls and to the boys too, because I've heard stories that we had another group here in Australia at a similar time called Zoot, and they would all dress up in pink outfits, and the boys wanted to kill them. The girls loved them. The boys wanted to go them, but the boys took to Skyhooks just as much, didn't you? So you really had the whole audience eating out of the palm of your hands.
Well, it's, you know, it was kind of weird because, you know, prior to that record taking off and prior to Countdown, right, we were playing like to university audiences, and it wasn't, you know, with the advent of Countdown, all of a
Which
sudden,
was if we just explain Countdown, Countdown was a national television music. It was a national music television show that everybody in Australia used to gather around in front of the telly on a Sunday night to watch it, and it would introduce new and old bands onto television, wouldn't it?
yeah, it was phenomenal, and it was in colour, which, you know, that I think that's why half the reason why they had us on there. I think we played the first Countdown, and it was it's the start of colour TV, and then of course we get on there and we're all sort of blitzed up. But yeah, look at you know, with that, all of a sudden we're playing Festival Hall in front of thousands of screaming girls, you know. And it was, yeah, which is kind of, you know, I'm sure they didn't understand half the songs, but they sure understood Red Song's smut, you know. And that was one of the band tracks, but everyone seemed to love that song. They'd sing along with it. And also it's all about, you know, wanking in the cinema. right, into a Twisties packet. And of course, all these girls would shrink the Twisties packets on the radiators at school, right? And they'd sort of shrink right down, and they'd throw hundreds of them up onto the stage. Crazy.
Would they? I never knew that.
They didn't throw bras or undies, but they threw these shrunken Twisties packets. Yeah.
What was the significance of shrunken Twisties packets?
I don't know, but it's it's mentioned in the song, But
so they picked it up. They picked it up from the lyrics and went for it. Yeah. How amazing! How amazing! Great. So it just exploded for you. I mean, after that first appearance on Countdown on coloured television, and after that first song landed itself as number one.
We had, the first song was Living in the 70s. It didn't quite make it to number one, but then we released Horror Movie, and that made it to number one national. Yeah, so that was the real start of, securing it, like that. We could play anywhere. We could play open air. We could play, we used to fill the Hordern Pavilion and, all the big rooms in Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane and Adelaide and Perth, And so it was an amazing trajectory.
Horror Movie was all about the television news, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. 6:30 News.
Not much has changed other than the fact that not all mainstream news is on at 6:30 anymore. It's still a horror movie, more so.
Yeah. And so that was another brilliant song of Greg's, It was just absolutely fantastic. I can remember when we wrote that. That was in the front room of my house. So I was living in South Yarra. My girlfriend and the front room there, and we came up with that, and that was a really, the intertwining riffs between Red and me. That's where it sort of started. The sound really started to solidify. Just all these riffs.
And he had this really scary image, didn't he? Because I remember going on to the TV show Blind Date, and I won him as a date, as a 16-year-old. And there was no way I was going out with that man who kept his tongue lolling out all over the place. And he was this big, imposing figure that was just, he was a bit like Weird Al Yankovic or something, really, wasn't he?
Well, we didn't know he was going to do that. He was always good like that. But so he I can remember that. That was in Channel 7. He's turned up as a blind date. So he's got dark glasses and a white stick. Yeah. And did he win you? Was that you? Or?
Yeah. No, he was. I was one of three contestants, and he was the date. And I one of the three contestants, and it was like, I'm not going, not doing this. Not quite sure why I put myself onto that show. I was still at school. It was crazy.
Yeah, but I can remember that you didn't actually see the guy, right? But so as soon as the girl won, they sort of came around this curtain, right? And he's gone and bit her on the neck, right?
Yes.
So basically, these guys are in the band there. They threw us off the show. Yeah, it was like they're going to beat us up, and so we got out of it.
He was pretty horrific. He was kind of the Alice Cooper of Australia, I guess.
Yeah. But see, that worked really well. Stuff like that used to happen all the time. Especially he was very clever. He loved to pull a prank.
Yeah. It's amazing that you got away with it in those days, really. Everything was so, all the antics were so new for those times, and you were just blowing people's brains and shocking everyone everywhere.
Well, that's what it was about. I mean, if you go on TV, you might as well make an impact, And Red sure did.
Yeah, he did indeed. Bob Starkie, your second album was Ego Is Not a Dirty Word. That debuted at number one. And as a result of that record, I mean, again, another classic Greg McCage song that and you're 100% right. It was full of cynicism.
Yes. Look, yeah, he takes a concept or an idea and he just really sort of fleshes it out in his, he's sort of in his own way. It's just incredible. There's no two songs the same, and
Yeah.
it's like it's not like we're a blues band or anything like that. It's far from it. But he was just an amazing songwriter. And
How would you describe the music? I mean, it was pretty genre. You couldn't pigeonhole it into any genre, really, could you?
well, I don't think there's another band in the world that sounds like us. But well, it's just I just always thought it was a pop band, but it had just really brilliant lyrics and very diverse. And as time went on, it just got sort of weirder and weirder, really. Um,
Greg McCain's got weirder and weirder.
I'm not going to say there,
No,
but
no, you don't. I can, I won't use it anyway.
he's out on his own there.
That's for sure.
I read a book.
So,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, go on.
I read a book on the great Australian songwriters, and he wasn't in it. And I thought, really, how could he not be in one of Australia's greatest songwriters? I found that really quite strange. But there's no one can come close to him. It's like he's so diverse and just so he's just clever.
Yeah. So ego is not a dirty word. Debuted at #1, and you decided that you'd head off to America to try and seek the fame and fortune there. What happened?
Oh well, it wasn't. It was just like we just went over to check it out, really. But what happened there? What happened there is we were signed up with a record company that were just crap, and it was like they were called Mercury, and basically we got mercury poisoning, and it was sort of like it was looking back at it, just what was great about that whole experience is we actually travelled all around America in a bus supporting all these different bands, and mainly we toured with Uriah Heep, which was I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, they're putting us with Uriah Heep, and they're sort of a heavy metal sort of band, and we were playing all around the South, like down in Austin, Texas. It's like Lynyrd Skynyrd territory, but we went down really well there, weirdly, and it was like they were asking us back, so it was like we were breaking territories, as we went. In the strangest places, and then we ended up headlining in Florida. Like we went in there and played a Uriah Heep show, but then we headlined our own show because the radio station there had picked it up, and we played like a 15,000 seater or something for us. We were gobsmacked.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can imagine.
Things happening, but the thing is, the reality was the thought of us touring around the bus basically takes about 7 years, right? Of trailing around the bus around America to really crack it. That's the reality of it. It was a real eye opener. But what was great about it is it really picked up our performance as a band. We were playing better. As a guitarist, I got better. It was a really great experience for me. And I think if I look back, on the Skyhooks, career or experience that I had, I think the highlight was making that record in the record plant in Sausalito, just north of San Francisco. That was just a great experience. And we had the engineer was the guy. He engineered Crosby, Stills and Nash and all these bands, and it was like, wow, and it was just a great experience for me, and I learned so much. And so I came back a better guitarist, but it was touring better, but it was pretty harrowing. Like it was, it was like I got quite depressed there for a while. And but anyhow, it was. And when we got home, I think Red, I thought, reading between the lines, I think he was thinking, oh God, how the thought of going back with this bunch of guys and being on a bus for 6 months at a time, I don't think it really appealed to him. So
the album.
he didn't
Oh,
make
sorry, go on.
he didn't make the fourth album. So Straight and Gay Gay.
So, but straight in a gay world was the one that you did in America, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and Red was on that one.
Oh yeah. And then, but then we done all the pre-production for Guilty Until Proven Insane, and then we're just about to go into the studio, and then there was this impasse between Greg and Red, and it just fell apart. And so we ended up getting a protege of Greg McCain's, who's a guitarist called Bobby Spencer, and he came in and filled Red's shoes, and we made a different record. And we managed to get what did we have off that? I think we had Women in Uniform was the hit off that.
Women in Uniform, that's right. That was a huge hit, a very hard rocking song. That I believe that Iron Maiden actually recorded a version of it.
Yeah, it was shit house.
Was it?
But even though,
but very flattering that they even tried to copy it.
Yeah, they could have done it way better, that's for sure. But it's look, that was a great performance. Freddie's drumming on that was breathtaking, and of course Shirl. We did I don't know how many takes we did. I think we might have done 2 or 3 takes, but it was played live. And when Freddie did that drum thing, he went out of time, and I think he went into 5/4 time or something like that, and then he just came back right on, after 4 bars, right on the money. And Shirl was just, screaming at the end of it. It was just, it was really exciting. I'll never forget that. It was just a great, and to see it go so well, there was a real thrill, that one.
Yeah. What was the chemistry like between you all?
Well, there was chemistry. I got to tell you, it was like, over the years, we came back a couple of times. So we had Reformation tours and what have you, and so I think it was we hadn't played together for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. Oh, wait a minute. We came back in the early 80s and did something. And it's kind of like when you go straight back in the room, there's the 5 of us in a studio just running through the songs. Then you see it. When you're sort of in the middle of it, you don't recognize what the chemistry is. But when you come back that first day, you go, wow, there is definitely.
We've still got it.
Yeah, and it's like when Red left the band, you could say the whole thing changed, and then when he came back in, it was like you go, wow, that's the combination.
So you took time off. Red left the band, then Shirl walked away from it too, didn't he? Before you came back again.
He went to TV and radio, and so look, basically, playing in a band's a bit of a mug's game. It's sort of, you're at the mercy of all these parasites, and look, it's one of those things. As you grow older, it's sort of like, unless you're really great mates, it's like it can be a bit of a drag, and it's like you look. I'm a Leo Dragon, right? And before I joined the Skyhooks, I ran my own show. Like I left home when I was 17 before I even finished school. I finished school schooling out in, with the lady in the suburbs, and it was sort of like, I was my own man. I did organise everything myself. I come into the Skyhooks, I'm the bottom of the heap, right? I'm the youngest in the band, and these, at the mercy of these really strong egos. And it's kind of like you go, it's like being married to four other, people, and it's sort of like after a while it can wear you down, especially and I think that's kind of what happened with the Skyhooks. It was sort of like we got into this situation where we were depending on each other, right? And if things didn't go right, it's sort of like, well, someone's going to get the blame, And I got scapegoated often because I was sort of at the bottom of
What happened? What does that mean?
Oh well, it's sort of, it's sort of like, it's like you get bullied, and but within the dynamic of things, that's kind of good because that makes me arc up, and I try harder and what have you, and it's like I'll show you sort of scenario, and I think Greg McCain was aware of that because he used to bait me a bit, and but I ended up delivering, and I sort of made
Yeah,
my.
well, from all accounts, you more than just delivered. You played those drums unbelievably well.
Oh, I'm not a drummer, honey. You've got that wrong.
You played that guitar unbelievably well.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
yeah. But it's sort of like look, the dynamics of bands and, as you say, the chemistry. That's a really important thing. But it's like even if you change a drummer, there's something just changes. It's like nothing's ever the same again, And
Yeah,
take
right.
like Cole Chisel, when their drummer died. I mean, he had that feel and that beat, and it was like there's no other drummer that could take his place, and it sound the same. It's really, really interesting when you see that. But within the
So,
dynamic of the band, after about 5 or 6 or 7 years, it just takes its toll, really. And if you're making millions and millions of dollars, that's all right. But if you're not, things just go awry. And I think that's Shirl decided, he playing in a band wasn't for him because it didn't pay well enough. So he got out and got into radio and TV, and he made a fortune.
so
But
how
then,
did you all come back together again?
well, funnily enough, it was Shirley and Greg who organised the tour in 1990, and they did a really good job. They took a management position, and we made more money than we ever did, on that tour, and so it was really good, and that they, he did it for the money, and he did it, he did it really well. He said, we've got to make a record to promote this, and that's when Greg came up with Jukebox in Siberia, which was another #1 hit. And they did a really good job. And
What's he Bongo? What's he talking about in Jukebox in Siberia?
oh well, it's just a really neat pop song, It's like he's talking about Russians, enjoying, Western music. Yeah, down and out hysteria. Get down, bloody Vostok. Drop a ruble in the slot of that jukebox in Siberia. Just a pop song, honey. There's no to it at all.
No, yeah. Okay. That was your third #1 hit. The other two had been produced by Ross Wilson. He didn't produce this one, did he?
No. No, he was out of the picture after Guilty Until Proven Insane.
So what difference did having him produce for you make?
Well, look, it's sort of everyone was like new and fresh back then. Like he'd been playing in Daddy Cool, and then Daddy Cool had sort of folded, and he had another band called Mighty Kong, and that wasn't going anywhere. And he decided he wanted to produce, right? And so when he saw the original Skyhooks at a university gig, I think it was Melbourne University, actually when my brother was in the band, and he recognised that they had these songs, and that's the important thing in a band. If you've got a songwriter, and then you've got something to work with. And so he started to sort of show interest then. And then I joined the band and Red joined the band. And we were starting to make headway. Like, as the year went on, the word was getting out a bit. But Ross Wilson, because of his interest in being a producer, he sort of got in the ear of Michael Gudinski from Mushroom Records, and the interest started coming, right, from the record companies. But it wasn't quite right. The sound wasn't quite right. And so it wasn't a lay down misère by any it just there was something that was stalling a little bit. And but anyhow, we played that 1974 Sunbury, and Steve Hill saw himself on the TV. There was shots of the band playing. It was played on the news, and for some reason he just lost confidence, and he called Greg up and said, "Look, I think I'm letting the band down here or something." He had this burst of lack of confidence, and he left the band. And no sooner had he left that Greg called up Shirley, and he came in, and that sealed the deal. It changed the sound, and it recorded really well, and it sounded really good live because he had a voice that could cut through any shitty PA, and it just sealed the deal. And so Ross Wilson, it was his first production thing, and he took it on board, and we were all very naive, and we sort of let him, we just did what we were told and what have you, and just just worked as hard as we could to make a record, for him, really. And it just ended up working, and
it sure did.
And
it sure did.
So, but we were very naive back then,
well, weren't we all?
Yeah.
What's your favourite Skyhooks song, Bongo?
That's a hard one.
Yeah, there's a lot to choose from.
Yeah, sure. And and they're all different. It's like some of them are nightmare to play. It's like
which?
Oh well, it's sort of, in many ways it's overplaying. all the riffs and what's going on. I mean, if you dropped your plectrum, you're in real trouble because there's no gaps, And so, some of those songs are just basically they're a bit of a chore to play, but others.
Would you hang on? Stop there a second. Which would you say is the most difficult to play?
One I often struggle with is "This Is My City." It's got some of the riffs in there. It's a millisecond. You got to get from your 12th fret down to the 3rd fret, like in a millisecond. It's like, and then play a really, quite a difficult riff. It's like the fingering, for that riff that leads into another riff. It's like, wow. And if really not on the money, it's sort of like it's drag. It was, I don't know how. I think that was like some of the transitions are really kind of tricky, and of course I think Red was the one who worked out that part. And it's, as I say, you get in the song, and you get into that part of the song, and I start to tense up. I'm thinking, here it comes.
Hoping you get it right.
Here it comes. Right.
And was Greg McCanch writing the music as well as the lyrics?
Yeah. He was, we contributed, we sort of, he'd have the basic framework of it and the whole thing, and then we'd sort of nut it out, and if it needed sort of something or whatever, Red would sort of, he was really clever at sort of working through chords in an interesting way. And I always felt, because the bass player was so busy, Greg liked to play all the riffs as well. I'd be sort of trying to find parts that would actually sort of plant it, sort of like Yeah, so
So if that one was the
in between the bass and the drum, you know, and both of them were really, really busy players, right? And so I'd sort of try and get something that sort of just, you know, rounded or whatever. Um,
right. So if that one was the most difficult to play, which one did you enjoy playing most?
um, I really love Sydney. Um, I don't know. Look, it changes on the note. It's like it depends
Which
what.
one gets the biggest reaction?
Uh, Actually, the biggest reaction is all my friends getting married. That's a
Really?
huge, yeah, it's a huge sing along, and I don't know. It's perhaps it's a sort of I don't know. I wouldn't call it twee song, but
It is a bit though. Compared to all the other songs, I would say that one is probably the most twee.
but everyone sings along, and yeah, that gets the biggest reaction to be quite honest. But women in uniform, I think that's our rockiest one. It's like it's sort of that really powers, and you know all the girls like that song.
Yeah, of course they do.
So many
Bob, but once you came together, you did the 1990 song Jukebox in Siberia, and it wasn't long after that that Shirley unfortunately lost his life in a terrible accident, was it?
yeah, terrible. Yeah, that was shocking. Um, yeah, that.
Can you tell us what happened?
Oh well, he look, it should never have happened. But I blame him because he, he always he always wanted to fly, and he always wanted to sail, and then he'd moved to Queensland. He decided to want to learn to fly helicopter, right? And so he's gone to this helicopter school on the Sunshine Coast there, and my gut feeling is he would have intimidated those people, you know, and I think he's turned up to do his first solo flight on a day when the conditions were horrific. I mean, it was really windy apparently, and they had big wind gusts and things like that going on. So I think to my mind, the way I feel about it is they would have gone, oh, listen, mate, don't go out today, whatever. Oh, no, it'll be all right. Don't you worry about that. I know what I'm doing, And he's hopped into this thing, and he's gone. There's a steep mountain there. It sort of pops up out of the ground. I think that's where it's happened. And he's gone too close, and a gust has got him and flipped the helicopter, right? Because it's like flying a tin can. Those things, they're so small, and and you can't fly a helicopter upside down. And so he's just gone, he's gone up, been flipped, and he's gone down. And
Yeah. That must have hit you guys very hard.
oh, look, it's like losing a brother. It was just terrible. It hit Red the most though. He was devastated, and I think he still is actually. But yeah, look, that guy was larger than life, and he was much loved. When at his funeral, like we had a thing in Melbourne for him, a remembrance thing at the Palais in Melbourne, and people flew from all over the world to be there. He had the guy from Quicksilver and Billabong. He flew in from Ireland, and he was in TV, so there was what's his name, Johnny Johnson, I think his name is like from Channel 9. He was there. He
Yeah.
spoke. There was from radio. You know, he was at the top of the heap in radio. He had his own TV show. And he was big in the surf scene. People just loved him. He was all over the shop. And of course, he was just a phenomenal singer in rock and roll. So he'd done all this stuff and excelled at pretty much everything. The only thing he was bad at flying a helicopter. God.
Oh, that's awful. Bob Starkie, as a result of Skyhooks then falling apart completely, how did you end up with being able to trade from the name?
Well, I'm a member of the Skyhooks, and it's the Skyhooks show. It's like it's not the Skyhooks, it's the Skyhooks show.
And you've been doing that since 2015, right?
Look, I think it's look. It wasn't planned, right? It was like I love playing rock and roll, and I love Chuck Berry and all that stuff out of the early '50s, from the '50s and early '60s. That's where I love, as a guitarist. I never learned to play guitar, but that's when I decided to learn to play guitar. That's where I placed myself. So I always had it like a band where I could just play in the corner of a pub and play this great music with great players. But then Greg and I were asked to do 3 suburban songs at this suburban music festival, and we did that, and it went down really well. And I sang the songs. I'm not a very good singer, but it still went down well. We did Ball and Calling and Two-Rat Cowboy and Carlton, and then they asked us to do it again the next year, and I just thought, oh, geez, we've already done that, it doesn't go down so well again, And so anyhow, Greg said, oh, look, let's do it. I said, and I'd seen this girl singing AC/DC, and she was in a band called ACD She, and I'd only seen her once, but I thought, wow, she really had this great presence, and she's really good with an audience. And I just thought, oh, well, maybe, with her range, it could work well. And so we invited her along, and she came and did it that year, and she just nailed it. And then after that, it was like, oh, what do we do here? And so anyhow, she started singing in my rock and roll band, and it was like, we do mainly, she come in and sit in, and we do rock and roll, and then it was like 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we'd sort of do a few Skyhooks songs. But then, it became pretty obvious that the audience were wanting the Skyhooks song.
Skyhooks, yeah.
So we had to sort of start doing more of them. And that's when I thought, well, you know what? Let's split it. We'll do a Skyhooks band, a Skyhooks show, and then, do my rock and roll thing. And so that's what's happened. So it's just grown incrementally. We started doing that, and it was sort of like I was finding players. And so it took me a while to get that together. So it took 2 or 3 years for it to sort of really get into some sort of shape. I actually had another singer doing it as well. Lisa Edwards came on deck there for a while, and but Laura was the one. I kept on coming back to her. I thought, you know what? It's the sound. She's got the sound.
She's with you now.
Yeah, she's with me now, and I won't do it without her. And it's sort of like, and I've got my guitarist, Michael Cristiano. He's really disciplined, and he plays the parts, and he plays everything really well. He gets the sounds and what have you. And we all have a great time. The band has got a chemistry, and we play like a band, and we love it. We have fun. And that's the only reason why we're doing it. I've got to tell you, I won't be doing it if it's not fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so is there any chance of the original members from Skyhook, obviously other than Shirl, coming together to do a reunion again?
No.
Definitely not. I know Greg's not interested.
Yeah, I know. I called him up and, it's like do a corporate or something. He said, look, I don't play bass anymore. I'm thinking, why not?
Of course, for anyone who doesn't know, he studied to be a lawyer, put many years into studying that, and then never practiced anyway. So he's a strange guy, and he certainly leaves the past in the past and sees Skyhooks as being far in his past, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's funny, but I would never say never with Greg, because he really is a great bass player, you know, and he can change his mind. But Red, there's no way. He hasn't played guitar in decades, and he's just not interested. I actually saw him yesterday, and you know we had a conversation, and it was sort of like you know I said I'm glad I've kept my playing up. And he said, well, that's right. You know, if you're a saxophonist or a pianist or a guitarist, you've got to keep it up. Otherwise, you know, you lose it. And he says, people keep asking me to, you know, like, will you do it again or whatever? And he says, his comment is, well, would you go and ask a 75-year-old footballer to go and play a game, right? It's like, it just doesn't work, you know, and it's similar. If you haven't
He's
played,
out of practice.
He's out of practice, and you know, I don't think, you know, he certainly doesn't need the money, and he doesn't need the heartache. But we could come together and play 2 or 3 songs.
No, we'd love that, because you were so.
No way, these guys could do 2.5 hours.
Yeah, right. No, I understand that. I mean, Skyhooks was so important to so many baby boomers in Australia that screamed their lungs out in 1975 at concerts. Some of us had our first kiss to your songs. I mean, there's so many fond memories for so many of us with Skyhooks. Thank goodness that you're keeping the music alive.
Yeah, well, I'm really, as I say, it wasn't planned, right? But it's taken a life of its own. I mean, there are moments where you sort of go, what the fuck am I doing here? It's like, you know, the amount of phone calls you have to make, the heartache with the, you know, like airlines, and, you know, it actually, you know, I get quite anxious sometimes. It's like, God, Jesus, you know. But when we get on stage and we do a good show, it's just fantastic. And I love these guys, and just being around them, just being in a band is just, you know, I've got to tell you, it's a great thing to do. You know,
Bob, was You Just Like Me Because I'm Good in Bed written about Greg? Did he write that about himself?
Yeah, well, that might be a bit autobiographical, you know, I think maybe. Who knows? It's just a nice twist, though, isn't it? It's just
that's Greg McCage. He's got a twist on it all.
And there's some great riffs in there. I heard that when I heard that was the first time when you know, my brother was in the band, and I went and saw the band. That was one song that stood out. I thought, whoa! And the other one was Carlton. That riff in Carlton. I thought, Jesus, you know, I said the Rolling Stones could do that, and it was yeah, like pretty exciting stuff.
Yeah, it's awesome music. Bob Bongo Starkie, I better let you go. You've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much for all your stories and filling us all in on the details of Skyhooks. It's great that you are keeping the music alive, and people, at least here in Australia, can go out and see you and hear the music still.
Thanks, Sandy. I've enjoyed talking to you, dragging up the past.